They say that she abandoned him. That's his excuse, that his ex-wife abandoned him.
In a stunning revelation, Doug Weiss has uncovered Marcus Lamb's hidden secrets, and what he reveals will leave you speechless. For years, Marcus Lamb has been a well-respected figure in Christian media, but behind closed doors, there were dark truths that were never meant to see the light of day. In this shocking exposé, Doug Weiss unmasks the untold story that could change everything you thought you knew about Marcus Lamb's legacy. Prepare to be stunned. The death of Marcus Lamb in 2021 sent shockwaves through the Daystar network and the Lamb family. Marcus had been the driving force behind the ministry, the face of Daystar, and a beacon of faith for millions of people worldwide. His sudden passing left a void that no one seemed truly prepared for, especially his family. While many expected Joni Lamb, his widow, to step into the leadership role, what followed was anything but a smooth transition. Joni had always played a supportive role behind the scenes, but now she was thrust into the public spotlight, expected to carry the weight of not only the family's grief, but also the future of Daystar. At first, she tried to reassure the public that everything would continue as before. She promised that the network would stay true to the values that Marcus had instilled in it. But as time went on, it became apparent that her leadership style was vastly different from Marcus. Instead of maintaining the collaborative approach that Marcus had valued, Joni took a more centralized, authoritative role. This shift in leadership raised eyebrows within the family. Marcus and Joni's son, Jonathan, had long been groomed to take over his father's role at Daystar. However, with Joni taking charge, Jonathan found himself sidelined. He was excluded from key decisions, and this was not just a professional setback, but a deeply personal one. The Lamb family, once united in their mission and vision for Daystar, was now divided. The tensions between Joni and Jonathan became more apparent as time passed. Jonathan, who had expected to follow in his father's footsteps, now faced the harsh reality that his future at Daystar was uncertain. This division within the Lamb family did not stay behind closed doors for long. The public, the media, and Daystar's supporters quickly noticed the rift. Fans who had supported Marcus and Daystar for years were now left confused and worried about the future of the ministry. Was the family going to fall apart? Was Daystar's legacy at risk? The lack of transparency and the growing tension within the Lamb family only fueled the speculation and doubts that were swirling around the ministry. What had once been a family working together toward a common goal was now fractured. The unity that had helped build Daystar into the global ministry it was seemed to be crumbling. The Lamb family's struggle wasn't just a personal matter. It was now a crisis that was threatening the very foundation of Daystar. The future of the network, once so certain, was now in jeopardy. The unraveling of the Lamb family's unity marked the beginning of a much larger crisis that would reverberate through Daystar and its followers for years to come. When Marcus Lamb passed away in 2021, the world of Daystar television network was thrown into disarray. For years, Marcus had been the charismatic face and spiritual backbone of the network, and his sudden death left a void that no one could have predicted. Many assumed his wife, Joni Lamb, would step up to lead the ministry and carry on the work they had both dedicated their lives to. What followed, however, was a series of controversial decisions that sparked public concern, internal family conflict, and an increasing divide among supporters of Daystar. Joni had always been a supportive presence behind the scenes. She was deeply involved in Daystar's growth, but never in the spotlight the way Marcus was. After his death, however, it became clear that Joni was going to assume the leadership role as the natural successor in a family-run ministry. The early days of her leadership seemed filled with promises of continuity. Joni promised to keep Marcus's vision alive, ensuring the ministry stayed true to its mission while navigating the personal loss of her husband. But as time passed, it became increasingly clear that Joni's leadership style was vastly different from her late husband's. Marcus had been known for his collaborative approach, engaging with the family, ministry partners, and staff in key decisions. Joni, on the other hand, adopted a more centralized and top-down approach. She began to make important decisions on her own, excluding others from the process, including her own son, Jonathan Lamb.
We turn now to Texas, where controversial Christian television CEO Marcus Lamb has died after his battle with COVID-19. The conservative televangelist making headlines this past year after his network Daystar dedicated hours of broadcast to anti-lockdown and anti-vaccination activists and groups. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has the story.
They don't even know what is in the shot.
Marcus Lamb, a broadcaster reaching hundreds of millions of people around the world and who vocally opposed the COVID-19 vaccine, died after battling the virus. He often spread misinformation on his network, which was one of the most popular channels with evangelical Christians in the country.
They're giving shots to people that are already compromised with their immune system.
And I wasn't going to cry, but
His wife announcing the news of his passing on Tuesday.
this morning at 4 a.m., the president and founder of Daystar and the love of my life went to be with Jesus.
Jonathan, who had been groomed for years to take over the ministry and was expected to carry on his father's legacy, suddenly found himself sidelined. The family, once united in their faith and shared vision for Daystar, now faced deepening rifts. Jonathan, who had worked alongside Marcus, now found himself excluded from critical decisions and distanced from the inner circle. This exclusion was not just professional, it was deeply personal, and it created a chasm between mother and son that would only continue to widen. As Joni took more control, questions began to surface about her leadership decisions. Her approach seemed increasingly authoritarian, and many wondered whether this was the best direction for Daystar. Joni's decisions, once made in consultation with others, were now being implemented unilaterally, and this left many of the people closest to the ministry feeling uncertain. What had once been a family-run ministry built on shared responsibility and collaboration was now being reshaped around Joni's vision, leaving little room for input from those who had helped build the organization. Amid the leadership changes, another major issue began to surface: Joni's relationship with Doug Weiss, a longtime family friend. Doug, a Christian marriage counselor and author, had been a quiet presence in Daystar for many years, but had never held a prominent role in the ministry. After Marcus's passing, however, Doug's influence within the ministry grew rapidly. Within months, Doug and Joni's relationship moved quickly, culminating in their marriage. The speed of this relationship and the timing, just months after Marga's death, raised eyebrows both inside and outside the family. Critics quickly began to question the nature of Joni's relationship with Doug. Was this a genuine emotional connection, or was it a calculated move to consolidate power within Daystar? The public's response was swift and divided. Some expressed sympathy for Joni, understanding that grief and healing take time. Others, however, were deeply concerned, seeing the rapid relationship as a possible conflict of interest, especially considering Doug's rising prominence within the ministry. They wondered whether his growing influence was due to his personal relationship with Joni, or whether it was based on merit and leadership ability. The situation became even more complicated when Doug was appointed to key leadership roles within Daystar. Many felt that Doug's sudden rise to power lacked transparency and proper succession planning. The Lamb family had long been the face of Daystar, and Marcus's death had created a natural opportunity for a family member to step into a leadership role. But as Joni brought Doug into the fold, many began to question if this was a genuine leadership transition or a move to place personal loyalty above the ministry's long-term health. The situation grew tense as family members, particularly Jonathan, became increasingly alienated from the leadership decisions Joni was making. Jonathan had always been expected to take on more responsibility within Daystar, and he felt that his mother's new relationship with Doug had sidelined him and marginalized his role within the ministry. The emotional strain within the Lamb family was apparent to anyone close to the ministry, and the public began to see the cracks in the foundation of Daystar. What had once been a united family working together for a common purpose was now fractured by personal issues, and the ministry was suffering as a result. The public controversy only added fuel to the fire. Supporters of Daystar, many of whom had followed Marcus and Joni's leadership for years, began to voice concerns. The sudden shift in leadership and the speed of Joni's relationship with Doug left many feeling uncomfortable and uncertain about the future of Daystar. Longtime supporters questioned the integrity of the leadership and whether the ministry was still on the right path. Donors, once generous and supportive, began to pull back their contributions, worried about the lack of transparency and the perceived shift in priorities. For them, the speed of the transition and the involvement of Doug in leadership roles seemed to signal a departure from the values that had made Daystar so successful. The family dynamic, once the bedrock of Daystar's success, was now a source of tension. The public airing of these private struggles only added to the turmoil, and the ministry's future seemed uncertain. What had once been a source of spiritual guidance for millions of viewers was now at the center of a leadership crisis, and questions about transparency, integrity, and accountability grew louder. The controversy surrounding Joni's leadership, her relationship with Doug, and the division within the Lamb family continued to cast a shadow over Daystar. leaving everyone wondering what the future held for the ministry and whether it could survive this tumultuous period. In the end, the controversial relationship and leadership shift exposed deep divides within the Lamb family and Daystar. The rapid pace of change and the lack of clarity about leadership roles created confusion and concern for both insiders and viewers alike. As the public and private drama unfolded, Daystar's future remained uncertain, and the legacy of Marcus Lamb, once so strong, seemed increasingly at risk. After Marcus Lamb's sudden passing in 2021, the Daystar television network, a ministry that had been built on his vision, was thrown into a state of uncertainty. Marcus had been the face of Daystar for years, beloved by millions of followers for his passionate faith and unwavering commitment to spreading the gospel. His death, while deeply felt personally, also created a void in the leadership of the network that had long been seen as his legacy. His widow, Joni Lamb, stepped in to fill the leadership role, but what followed was an unfolding drama that would not only shake the foundations of the Lamb family, but also raise questions about the future of Daystar itself. Joni's transition into leadership wasn't as smooth as many had hoped. Initially, she promised continuity, maintaining the values Marcus had instilled in the ministry and honoring his legacy. However, the reality of leading such a powerful ministry was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. What started as a personal tragedy quickly became a public spectacle, with increasing family tensions and a leadership shift that divided both the Lamb family and Daystar's supporters. One of the most significant challenges Joni faced was navigating the expectations of the ministry while dealing with her own grief. Her sudden rise to power was a natural consequence of Marcus's death, but the circumstances surrounding it were far from ordinary. Many expected Joni to seamlessly step into Marcus's shoes, but her approach to leadership was very different from his. Marcus had been known for his collaborative, inclusive style of leadership, where decisions were often made as a family unit, with input from key ministry staff. Joni, on the other hand, began to adopt a more centralized, authoritative style of leadership that quickly raised concerns among family members, especially her son, Jonathan Lamb. Jonathan, who had been groomed to take over Daystar's leadership alongside Marcus for years, found himself sidelined. Despite his experience and deep involvement in the ministry, Jonathan's voice became increasingly marginalized in key decisions. This exclusion was not only professional but deeply personal. The rift between Joni and Jonathan grew as Joni became more resolute in her leadership, and Jonathan struggled to find his place within a family that had once worked together as a unit. The tension was palpable, and it became clear that the leadership transition was more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The Lamb family, once united in their mission, was now split. Jonathan's growing frustration was mirrored by other family members who felt that the leadership of Daystar was being taken over by a single, powerful figure rather than being shared among the family. For years, the Lambs had built Daystar together, working as a family, with each member contributing to the ministry's growth and success. Joni's rapid consolidation of power left many feeling excluded and hurt, particularly Jonathan, who had always been expected to take a more prominent role. The tension between mother and son was no longer just a private matter. It was becoming public. As Joni's leadership style grew more centralized, the cracks within the family began to show. This internal strife didn't just affect the family. It had a significant impact on Daystar's reputation. The network, once seen as a beacon of faith, began to experience growing uncertainty from its supporters. The once united front that Marcus had created was now fractured, and the lack of transparency in leadership decisions only fueled speculation. Daystar's supporters, many of whom had followed the Lamb family's work for years, began to question the direction the ministry was heading in. What had once been a symbol of trust and stability now felt like it was teetering on the edge of a crisis. The family drama, though deeply personal, became public as well. Rumors began to swirl, and whispers about the division within the Lamb family spread throughout the ministry. What had been an internal family conflict became a larger issue that was impossible to ignore. Jonathan's exclusion from the decision-making process was seen by some as a betrayal of Marcus's vision for Daystar. Others wondered whether the shift in leadership was part of a larger strategy to maintain control of the ministry. The lack of clarity from Joni about her decisions only deepened the divide. Amidst this turmoil, Joni made a decision that would change the course of Daystar's history: her relationship with Doug Weiss. Doug, a Christian marriage counselor and author, had been a family friend for years, but his influence within Daystar grew significantly after Marcus's death. Within months, Joni and Doug's relationship blossomed, and they were married. The speed of their relationship and marriage raised eyebrows, particularly within the context of the growing tension in the Lamb family. Critics questioned whether this relationship was truly about love and healing, or if it was part of a broader strategy to consolidate power within Daystar. The marriage to Doug, combined with his growing influence within the ministry, added another layer of complexity to the situation. Many felt that Doug's rapid ascent within the ministry was inappropriate, considering the speed at which the relationship developed. Joni's close relationship with Doug seemed to overshadow Jonathan, who had been groomed for years to take over the leadership of Daystar. The speed of Joni and Doug's relationship made many uncomfortable, especially given the circumstances surrounding Marcus's death. Was this a genuine emotional connection, or was it a calculated move to strengthen control over Daystar? As Doug became more involved in Daystar's leadership, the perception that the ministry was becoming more centralized around Joni and Doug grew. This shift in leadership dynamics was deeply unsettling for many within the ministry. The collaborative, family-oriented approach that had once defined Daystar's operations was being replaced by a more top-down structure, with Joni and Doug at the helm. This change was not well received by many employees, ministry partners, and longtime supporters. The fear that the ministry's mission was being diluted in favor of personal interests began to take hold. The fallout was immediate. Daystar's supporters, many of whom had been loyal to Marcus and his vision, began to distance themselves from the ministry. Donors who had once been generous with their contributions hesitated, unsure of how their money was being spent under this new leadership structure. The perception of a lack of transparency and accountability only intensified the concerns. The Lamb family's internal struggles were now becoming a public crisis, and the reputational damage was undeniable. The tension within the Lamb family and the changes in Daystar's leadership were not just causing problems within the ministry. They were also threatening its financial stability. With donations declining and key ministry partners distancing themselves, the future of Daystar was in jeopardy. The growing divide within the family and the questions about leadership created a sense of instability that many found hard to ignore. The changes in leadership and the personal dynamics within the family had shaken the trust of the ministry's supporters, and the damage was starting to show. Despite the challenges, Joni defended her decisions, claiming that her actions were guided by faith and prayer. She framed her marriage to Doug as a step toward healing and moving forward after the loss of her husband. Joni emphasized that the changes within Daystar were necessary for the ministry's continued growth and success. However, the backlash was palpable, and calls for transparency and more collaborative leadership grew louder. In the end, the family tensions and leadership struggles exposed deep fractures within Daystar, and the impact on its reputation was profound. The ministry, once seen as a beacon of hope and faith, was now grappling with uncertainty and division. The fallout from Marcus's death, combined with the rapid leadership shift and Joni's controversial relationship with Doug, left the ministry facing difficult questions about its future. Whether Daystar could recover from this internal turmoil and regain the trust of its supporters remained to be seen. The Lamb family's personal struggles had become a public crisis, and it was unclear how the ministry would navigate the challenges ahead. The Lamb family's internal struggles and the shift in leadership at Daystar Television have left the ministry at a crossroads. Once a pillar of Christian media, Daystar now finds itself facing significant challenges that extend beyond personal conflicts. The question that lingers for many supporters, employees, and viewers is, what does the future hold for Daystar? Daystar's history is one of growth, influence, and success, largely driven by the vision and leadership of Marcus Lamb. Marcus was a figurehead in the Christian television world, and under his direction, Daystar became one of the most influential ministries globally. His vision of spreading the gospel through the power of media resonated with millions of viewers, and the network became a trusted source of faith-based content. The Lamb family's commitment to faith, integrity, and community building was central to the success of Daystar. But the loss of Marcus in 2021 marked the beginning of a new chapter for the ministry, one filled with uncertainty and division. Joni Lamb, Marcus's widow, assumed the leadership role after his death, and while many sympathized with her loss, her transition into this position was anything but smooth. Joni had long been a supportive presence behind the scenes, but leadership at Daystar required much more. While she promised continuity and a respect for Marcus's legacy, the reality of stepping into such a powerful role exposed the complexities of leadership and the vulnerabilities of a family ministry. The early days of Joni's leadership were marked by growing family tensions, particularly with her son Jonathan Lamb. Jonathan had been groomed for leadership within Daystar, and many expected him to step into his father's shoes. However, Joni's leadership style began to shift dramatically. What had once been a family-oriented, collaborative leadership structure turned into a more centralized, authoritative approach. Joni made key decisions independently, sidelining Jonathan and other family members, which led to increasing tension within the Lamb family. This exclusion created personal and professional rifts that spilled over into the public eye, leaving many supporters questioning the direction of the ministry.